There is a lot of fear, there is anticipation, there is also interest and excitement around how we can use generative AI in the newsrooms. So I have these 4 panelists. I'll just go and right away introduce all of them in the speaking order. So I'll start with Jaemark Tordecilla, who is a 2024 Nieman Fellow at the Harvard University, and is also the former editor-in-chief of GMA News Online from the Philippines. Yeah?
Morning.
Good morning. And then next is Khalil Cassimally, who's also the head of Audience Insights at The Conversation. Next to me is Irene, most of you know her, is the Regional Director for Asia Pacific at the International Fund for Public Interest Media. And of course, last but not the least, we have Don Kevin Hapal from here, the Philippines, who is also the Data and Innovations Director at the Rappler. Yeah? So they all get 5 minutes each to have their opening remarks, and we start with Jaemark.
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be in this panel this morning. So over my year at the Nieman Foundation, I did a lot of work trying to figure out how we could use AI tools in the newsroom. And I did a lot of zooming back to newsrooms in Manila to share what I found out. And what I found out was that there's a lot of interest among journalists and newsrooms back home to figure out how these tools could be used for journalists for both production, distribution, finding stories. But using AI tools for journalism purposes isn't quite as straightforward as you would use it for any other creative purpose. In large part because AI, it's great for questions where you don't have to have correct answers, which is terrible for journalism, where you have to have precise answers or else you would get in trouble with your audiences. And so there needs to be experts or at least people of interest to try to figure out how these tools work for the newsroom context. What I found, for example, in the work that I did is that you really couldn't outsource your critical thinking to AI tools. Like you couldn't ask ChatGPT to pretend it's a journalist and tell you what's the big story in this piece of document. A better use of it would be to summarize the tools and then have the human come in and to use that critical thinking to find a story in a particular piece of documents. And so it's very promising, but we're behind our audiences in large part. I shared with my colleagues here on the panel the data. I think the Philippines is 4th in the world in terms of using ChatGPT. So we've been number 3 for a long while, but we dropped to number 4 in May. After the United States, there's India, and then Colombo, and then the Philippines. So sometimes I would give my talks to journalism faculty, and I would ask them if they use AI in their daily lives. Most of them say they don't. And then I tell them, oh, your students probably already use AI before you do. So we have a lot of catching up, but the good news is the technology is nascent. There really are no experts, at least no experts in terms of newsroom use because of how new technology is. And I would talk about the jagged frontier more during the panel, but it's really an exciting time where everyone is trying to figure out how to make these tools work for specific newsroom purposes. Thank you.
We move to Khalil.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on the panel. So I'm with The Conversation, and around, I would say 6 months ago, we started a project to kind of look a little bit deeper into AI and try to figure out whether there were like, good ways for us to be able to kind of use AI as part of the journalism that we do. So with the conversation, for you guys who don't know about us, the entire point of the conversation is to get academics and researchers. They write about news and analysis, but they only write about their area of expertise. So the project that we did 6 months ago was really focused on the Indonesian election. And it was really kind of centered around audiences. So we know at the conversation, we've got the experts who are going to, cover the elections with that evidence-based journalism that we're known for. But how do we kind of bring that journalism closer to the audiences, especially younger audiences, which was kind of the target audience that we were really trying to be valuable for the AI project in particular. And the reason why we wanted to kind of target that younger audiences, obviously, loads of benefits, making sure that the younger audiences are getting the information, but also we know that one of the things that younger people tend to tell us about elections and news coverage in general is it's not really serving their own needs. So that was the problem that we were trying to fix using generative AI. So our project was actually quite simple in that we were able to kind of go into our archive, but also the latest stories that our experts were writing. And we created an entire kind of what we call a microsite, but basically it was like a landing page for people to go to get information very quickly. So that was really the value add. With AI, we were very quickly able to create different formats for that younger audience to consume information. So we were able to give people information very quickly in terms of bullet points, in terms of audio, and different other formats as well. And what we found was that by giving people information in those different formats, people would consume more of that information, and we would get feedback that it was actually quite valuable for them. So we obviously still had the 800-word article, and people were reading those, but for that younger audience, providing them with the same information but in different formats worked quite well. And we were able to do that only thanks to AI. So the process was really simple, and that's kind of my main takeaway for those opening remarks is we can just really go out there and use the tools that are available to everyone to actually be able to produce something different. So for us, it was the different formats. We basically just fed the AI the articles that we wanted to repurpose into different formats. Obviously made sure that we had the editors to fact check everything afterwards, obviously really important. What we found, our personal experience, was there was not that much hallucination, so the output was actually quite trustworthy and accurate. But ultimately, the point is, we went out there, tried something, did it. We found out it worked quite well for the audience. And I think that it is something that all of us in this room can just go out there and do. So if you haven't really tried it yet, just go out there and try it. Do experiments and see if they work. And if it's not working, then just stop it, do something else. I feel like, as my colleague just said, the audience is ahead of us here. They're using it, so we should probably use it and figure out how best to give the audiences value. And if we can do that, everyone benefits, I think.
Thank you. We move on to Irene now.
So much. And it's such a pleasure to be on stage with these folks. What I find remarkable is that in these opening remarks, we're hearing a lot of the word audience and user. And I think that that is a statement to a recognition that we need to be user first. And that, there's been a lot of dialogue, especially when we're talking about things like mis and disinformation, content, online harms, this kind of focus on the responsibility of the platforms and tech companies. And I think that more and more we need to think about partnership and a recognition that ultimately the biggest change that we've seen in the evolution, whether you're talking about moving from print to radio, to TV, to Web 1, to social media, to Web 3, and now into generative AI, is that technology is a mediation point, and more so. And what has changed more than anything else is that the user is completely in control and empowered. They decide how they want to get information. And what is strange is that none of these technologies have actually replaced any of them. Print still exists, radio, TV, online, social media, chats, everything, and now generative AI. And so this focus on the user is going to be increasingly important. To me, the most important shift, and in my role at the International Fund for Public Interest Media, we are looking at, yes, the support and focus on helping to support individual media outlets to survive and thrive in especially in the Global South. However, we are looking at this from this point of view of ensuring a strong information ecosystem more broadly. So we aren't just focused on individual organizations and the survival of individual organizations. We're focused on ensuring that there is a healthy information ecosystem for the people in these markets that we operate in. And so, if you're thinking about it from that very broad point of view, generative AI is going to be completely transformative. You know, people may say they may not be actively using ChatGPT every single day or at all, and yet generative AI is in their daily lives every single day. Anytime you hit an autocomplete in your email, or you go online to search, or on social media, an algorithm and AI is helping you to figure out your connection to the world. And so generative AI is something that is just going to be completely, I think that, you know, this is my own personal view, but I think that in the next 5 years, the connection between any particular news organization or brand is going to be even further distanced to the actual user. There will be spaces that are AI mediated. There will be, in this world where there's lack of trust in institutions, people are going to rely on their family and friends, and they will be relying on information that's sent through chatbots. We've already seen this. They were going to increasingly be interested in what influencers and content creators have to say. We've seen this in several elections. This is the big year of elections. In the Philippines, we saw how nano influencers were able to shape the voter, and connect with people in a way that traditional news wasn't necessarily able to do. Politicians now are able to directly connect with their users. But even so, that is mediated through a platform or through an algorithm. So I think that one thing that is going to be really important as we think through the ethics of using these tools and how newsrooms incorporate this is a broader view of exactly where the news and where journalism will fit into this broader information ecosystem. Is the focus going to be on the creation of information and then finding ways to ensure that it can be funded, that it's sustainable, and that it gets into the hands of those who need that information to make choices in their lives? Are they going to focus on the production, or are they going to also be trying to navigate through all the different platforms to get to that end user? And, which is an important issue for us, and the most important issue, is how do you fund this? How do you fund the hard work of collecting information and translating the real world into the ones and zeros that will be used by all these different platforms? And how do we make sure that those who are doing that hard work are able to have a sustainable way to do this? Journalism is hard, it's expensive, in many countries, it's dangerous. So we need to make sure that that model can thrive into the future, while also acknowledging that ultimately the user at the end is going to be the one who determines whether or not the information that you are creating is actually going to be translated into action, into their own lives or into their society.
Thank you. And Kevin?
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm also very honored to be here with very distinguished panels. I'm here to represent Rappler, a news organization here in the Philippines. And I'd like to say it's pretty much become an AI-powered newsroom. AI has pretty much been integrated into the whole editorial process. Our reporters use AI tools every day. They use it in their writing process. There are compliance checkers also for editors for SEO, and that's pretty much been powered by AI. And a bunch of other executions, which I hope I'd be able to share later on. But just like really to point out that there was never really a grand strategy for Rappler. We never really sat down and planned for us to be an AI-powered newsroom. Technology has always just been a pillar for us, and we've always just leverage it for journalism and civic engagement wherever possible. So AI just happened to be a piece of technology that we could use to solve one problem at a time. So that's how we've really been doing it. What we consciously did, however, which I think I wanted to emphasize because I think it's helped us adapt AI faster, was to really create a strong data culture within Rappler first. So in 2018, when Rappler was at a crisis, when the government was trying to close us down, we decided that as a company and as a strategy, we were going to pivot to data. So we were going to put data at the core of operations. We're going to use data as much as possible, help use it to navigate through the crisis, etc. So we were so that serious about that culture shift. We had this whole change management plan rolled out for the next 2-3 years. And the first thing we did was to create an enabling team. So we brought in data scientists, data specialists, people that they didn't exist in newsrooms way before. But started bringing those in, created their own data team so that they could help us push us forward in terms of data maturity and also build the infrastructure we needed for change. But more importantly, we've started to really promote data across every unit in Rappler, making sure that everybody so it's a lot of effort in upskilling, making people comfortable working with data, and just making sure our reporters are also have been encouraged to do more data stories, work with data better. But I think the most important part of that is we rolled out this unified data policy where we instructed everybody to really follow guidelines in terms of how they should be collecting, processing, and storing data in such a way that the data can be used beyond just one stories, right? Because we were sitting on a lot of data, but they were not being reused or they were not being stored in a way that's adequate for further processing, which was very important because our goal then was to create a knowledge graph, which is what you see here. So we wanted to create this really big database of all entities around Philippine politics and all the relationships between those different entities, which turned out to be very important to us because it became foundational to a lot of the AI machine learning executions that we had in mind in the future. And it wouldn't have been possible if we didn't create that culture around that continuous data stream, the conventions that people in Rappler could follow. And it's been very important for us because, for example, one of the use case here, as you can see, we're using that data from the knowledge graph in the 2022 elections. There were 50,000 candidates running for public posts. We wanted their profile on our website for each one of them because we thought it was very important. But at the same time, we didn't have the resource or the time and enough manpower to write all 50,000 profiles. So we use ChatGPT to write all 50,000 profiles on the Rappler website. So profile for every candidate and also information around 2,000 locals in the Philippines. And ChatGPT was grounded on the knowledge graph that we had. That's to really prevent it from hallucinations or making things up. So we were able to do that with AI. And then we were also able to investigate the data itself, like the connections, using semantic network. We look at the dynamics of the relationships of people in Philippine politics. And we could use that for industry reports, landscape reports, what we were able to eventually monetize through briefings, through premium content, etc. So I really just wanted to start there, because I think what we've learned so far in our journey is that if you really want to become like an AI-powered newsroom, I think a good first step would be to create a strong data culture first, because at the end of the day, AI systems are only as good as the quality of data that you have, and data-savvy employees are also adapt so much more easily with AI. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you. Thanks to all four of you. So you heard from them, and please keep your questions ready, but I'll have my first round with them. So first question would be to Jaemark. A lot of places, particularly in this part of the region, you don't have the digital foundations really in place, even though we talk about artificial intelligence and how we can use it in the newsrooms. So how do we make these decisions around what can be AI-assisted and what should not be AI-assisted? How do we make those decisions in newsrooms today?
I think the answer is different for every newsroom. Depends on their needs. In the case of Rappler, where it's a very big newsroom and they could afford to have a whole data team, then it's easier for them. And they've been ahead of the curve. They're the first to publish AI guidelines here in the Philippines, I think. But if you're a newsroom, and we all know the problems of newsrooms, not just in the Philippines, but around the world, staff shortages, and so there's the big opportunity there to figure out ways to see how AI could help their processes. I think the very first thing you have to think about is what value you bring to the journalism process. So if you think about journalism as a value chain, so you go from gathering information to writing to production to distribution, what really is the value that your staff brings along that chain? And for the most part, the value you would bring is in the news gathering. Like, I was taking an AI class in November, and my professor actually asked me, what stops robots from replacing journalists? Couldn't a robot go into a community and ask questions to the community? And I answered her, well, it's just not the same. In the same way that I couldn't go into Sri Lanka and get the stories that you would be able to get, then a robot wouldn't be able to get those same stories. And so when you think about it, for example, here in the Philippines, there's a lot of focus, if you're in a journalism school or if you're training to be a journalist, on getting perfect copy. And that's, obviously, we should all strive for good copy, perfect copy. But then with AI tools, maybe that's not as important anymore. Someone who's a great reporter but who may not be as good writing in English could get their reports out into the world better with AI tools. People who don't have the training in terms of data journalism or data analysis, they could use AI tools to get structured information out of unstructured data, which is a lot of the work that I've done. And so, in a certain sense, it could democratize access to some of these things. Like any journalist with a bit of training could use AI to short-circuit that process of being data journalists or data analysts. But there's a lot of figuring out that needs to do within each specific newsroom, I think.
Thank you. Khalil, you come from a newsroom where it's known for its research rigor and also high-quality journalism. And my question would be, it's also when people think about transitioning from towards AI, so it's also about prohibitive costs. Is it very costly to make this transition? And as he said, different newsrooms, different levels of technology being enabled, but there is this fear that Asian newsrooms may not necessarily be able to afford it. Maybe some of them could, but not all. Is this true?
Yeah, I think again the answer will be it depends on the different newsrooms and the different news organizations. So if the project or the type of work that a newsroom is looking to do is similar to that project I talked about earlier, which is really reformatting the content into different formats, etc., it's really not cost prohibitive at all. So we basically created an entire website for less than like $50, using all the tools that are already available online to the public. Even for kind of like more mature type of work, I would say, where you kind of want to connect to like APIs and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's not that expensive at all. So in terms of cost, it's not prohibitive at all. I would say that in terms of the learning or the expertise of people to use those tools, etc. Again, that's not prohibitive. It's you start using it and it's very intuitive. People kind of get used to it very quickly. There's a lot of what we're calling prompt engineering now, which is basically the quality of the prompts that you're giving the generative AI tools for them to come up with stuff. There's a bit of a learning curve, but again, it's so intuitive, and those things are, I think, only going to get easier and easier. People will be, more and more familiar with prompts. The AI tools going forward will probably require less specific prompts to give quite specific information. So, on that sense, I guess what I'm trying to say, on that sense, I don't think it's there's a big barrier there. But obviously, I've talked about generative AI and producing different content, but obviously AI can do like other stuff as well in the background. So if we're starting to look at quite a lot of data, then it depends. Can be, I suppose, a bit more expensive. And if the transition is similar-ish to Rappler, for example, and if you're starting from scratch, then it might take a bit more time. But ultimately, I think anything that will, at the end of the day, bring value not just to the newsroom but to the audiences is something that we really should investigate and try to see how we can, really make it work. Whether it's figure out the cost, find a way to do it, basically.
Thank you, Irene. So you spearhead newsroom innovation, and you speak a lot and work around diversity and inclusion in newsrooms. How do we best utilize this brand moment where we all seem to be wanting to transition or already are transitioning to ensure that the ecosystem is a lot more inclusive, that the use of technology is not divisive and put somebody down and help somebody to play the biggie?
No, thank you. And Khalil, I will respectfully disagree with you. I think that in many markets, in many newsrooms, particularly small local newsrooms, $50 is cost prohibitive. It's not just the cost to put out, a credit card or whatnot. It's the knowledge required to implement, and it is the resource of time. And so I think that one of the things that will be very interesting to see as we move in the future is not only what a newsroom can do and how they leverage the technology to better serve their audiences, but it's the flip side, which is how is their information that they are producing being used by others to deliver information. One of the big challenges is that those who are producing the information are not necessarily the ones who are getting compensated for the use of that. And this is going to be a central question for generative AI. We're already seeing a race for high quality, authoritative, timely information in English. This is why we are seeing tech companies now going and signing deals with the bigger companies. Part of it is mitigating against regulation, but also part of it is to get exclusive access to archives and that high quality information. Your small newsroom in Mindanao is not going to be getting a licensing deal. right? It's just not going to happen. But for users, for audiences all around, if they're going to end up using these tools, if they're going to be on social media and using search and using an AI assistant, they want to have their information to be authoritative, quality. It's going to be locally relevant. It's going to be culturally relevant. And one thing that is so interesting about where we are with generative AI is language is so important, and culture becomes very, very important. You know, Rappler building this knowledge graph is, to me, a very fascinating project because, I mean, the knowledge graph is what powers Google search globally. But if most of your engineers are based in the West, if most of the data that you are using to hone these kinds of technologies is in English or a few major languages, and is not culturally specific, then it will not be as relevant. And so when we are talking about generative AI, it becomes even more important. And this is the opportunity because, you know, already, I mean, the train has left the station, right? We've already seen that this technology is out in the wild, it's being used. Companies that may not even necessarily want to be so rapidly adopting generative AI into their products are being pushed to do so by the market. And so, but in many of the markets that we're talking about, there's a little bit more time because language matters, the quality and the volume of data that you're getting in local language, honing the technologies to serve and not hallucinate, to understand what all these words, these strings of words mean. There is time. But the one thing that I would say is if we want to ensure that there is an inclusive, diverse ecosystem of information, what needs to happen, which has not happened ever in the history of the news industry, is there needs to be more collaboration across newsrooms. Any individual organization, no matter how big, will not survive this information ecosystem situation that we're in unless the industry comes together. And not only comes together amongst each other, but also broadens the view of what information is. What is public information? Public information doesn't only now come from journalists. And the way I define public interest information is not not only the most inspirational investigative reporting that I think gets all of us super excited and inspired, which is critically important to society, but it's the information that people are using day to day. Think about your own, how you look for information. Like, how many times is it actually about a news event? A lot of times it's just about questions you have in your daily life. If this industry is going to survive, we need to start working together. We need to start engaging in the regulatory conversation. We need to start engaging in the literacy questions and being part of that conversation of how people use information and where they get it from.
Thank you. Kevin, I have a couple of quick questions, and thank you for sharing the Rappler experience. But when you're using AI systems, and how do you make it within the editorial all accountable to your audiences, and how do you manage editorial oversight while you manage the content? Connected to that is also the other question, whether automation has resulted in the loss of jobs. This is the big question. Everybody thinks that we are just about to lose our jobs and human creativity is almost, being replaced by a robot. Could you please answer that one?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the second question. I think we started really experimenting a lot more with generative AI just last year when we joined AIJC. And some of you, I think my team have met in Chiang Mai. So that's really when we created this project called TLDR, and we got the fund to do it because of this grant, where it was a very simple set of workflows that were AI powered and allowed us to create short form derivatives from long form content. I'm not gonna dive into that because I think a lot of these text video AI summarization, I think other newsrooms have already been doing it. But I think just to answer your question, I think I'd like to focus on what we've learned in trying to introduce this, because I think the hardest part of the process wasn't actually in developing them. They were pretty easy to develop. But in trying to get the newsroom to adopt them and trying to make them more comfortable in using them, because there was in fact a lot of reluctance from people with the company using generative AI. So we found that the barriers to adoption then were coming mainly from three fears, one of which you've mentioned, which is the fear of irrelevance, that there's this very real fear and very valid fear about being replaced by AI tools. So because in the newsroom, you have writers, you have producers, editors, and artists, all of whom feel threatened by what AI can do. But the second one, I think, is also the fear of the unknown, which stems from a lot of, a lack of understanding about what AI can and it cannot do. We've noticed that when we started talking to our employees, also there was a lot of bloated expectations about what these AI tools can do. There's a lot of hype right now around the AI, and we'd find in sometimes when we have them finally try out these AI tools, they get very disappointed about when they realize it's not magic. It's not as magical as they thought it would be, right? And lastly, I think there's also the barrier. There's this fear of public backlash, because our audiences hold us to very high ethical standards. So there's also fear that maybe if we start using these tools, they might not, we might anger some of our audiences. And I think the way we've tried to overcome these problems would be to really take a bottom-up approach in introducing these tools. So we didn't want our audience and our employees to be thinking that we were using AI just for the sake of it, we weren't emphasizing, efficiency whatsoever. When we publish our AI guidelines, we declared there that the sole aim of our exploration into AI is to be able to do more journalism, is to bolster our journalism, empower our reporters, allow us to do the things that matter. And we've also emphasized there, and we've declared it to our audience so that they could hold us accountable, that we believe that human critical thinking and creativity is still supreme. So we'll never use AI tools to replace any of our employees. And we never really have laid people off because of AI to be replaced by AI tools. So the way we develop AI tools, we always start from a genuine need. We always consult on our employees first and our audience first, and we probe into what they need. And that allows us to know what we'll build next. So for instance, when we created the text-to-video tool here, for example, it was based on these consultations, and we found out that our audiences really like news in shorter video format. But our producers hated doing them because they're so boring. It's very mechanical work for them, and they feel like they could be spending a lot more time doing high-impact work like documentaries, those things. So when we introduced this process to them, they became actually more open when they realized that by delegating this to AI, they'd be freed up. They'd be able to focus on the high impact content that they wanted to do. And that's always been kind of like the value that we always emphasize when we're using these tools. You can let the AI do what it does best, and so you could focus on what you do best as well, even for our journalists. And for your question about editorial oversight, last year we also created this internal working group in Rappler. It's called the AI cluster. So there's representation there from every unit, and it works because the newsroom is already a very diverse place as it is. You have artists, you have video editors, photographers there. So you get pretty much a representation already of different industries. And that cluster in Rappler is in charge of really being like an initial gatekeeper. So they propose, discuss, and vet all experiments on AI, and make sure everything goes through a very rigorous screening process. So we don't just make sure we don't just check the output. We also really look into the tools that we use. We really look into, are they sourcing data ethically? Are they protecting data privacy? Right? Do they uphold intellectual property rights? So those are things that this working group reviews before we deploy anything out. And then we did publish the AI guidelines, as Jaemark mentioned earlier, just to make sure that our audience can hold us accountable as well. So in it, we said, okay, we'll be exploring AI, we'll be very open to it, but also very prudent. It will always be in the service of journalism, and there would be nothing comes out without being reviewed by humans, by our editors and our employees. And we always fully disclose to our viewers when content has been produced by AI. So there's always a disclaimer, a disclosure of sort. And then, of course, there's feedback mechanisms just to make sure everybody, our audience also can really give us feedback and flag if there's anything wrong, anything not factual with what we produce. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure all of you have a lot of questions. Do you? Yes. All right. Just, if you would like to, just let me have another round of quick questions before we actually get back to you. So I think we will limit the answers to something like 2 minutes each so that they get more opportunity to ask questions. You did speak, Jaemark, about, I'll get back to you, I saw the hands that go up. Outsourcing your critical thinking, that's not going to happen, right? We are not outsourcing our critical thinking.
We shouldn't, but
some people do. Okay. But this also, there's a lot of hype around this. Yeah, we are going to have AI in our newsrooms, but it calls for a specific set of skills and expertise that is required in a newsroom to make that transition and to create that, improve your production process. How do you go about it?
Actually, Kevin alluded to it earlier.
Yes.
The more you use AI tools, the more you realize how stupid it is. That it's not going to replace the whole production process because it's just not good enough yet. And so there's a lot of hype there. That's why there's billion-dollar valuations for these tech companies. But it's a good tool, but it's a tool. And so tools usually lead to disruption. I mean, 30 years ago, you had a pool of secretaries in offices doing just typing, and now we have word processors, and that pool is gone. And those people who would be doing those jobs otherwise are doing other jobs too. So I think once you get past the hype, you'll have a sober look at how these things are just tools. And in fact, writing isn't even the most interesting thing you could do with these tools. Like, I hope by now we've learned that lesson that you couldn't rely on generative AI to give you reliable information out of the box. It has to be you who gathers that information. And I just wanted to add on to Irene's point about she sort of talked about inequality. So a lot of my work is trying to democratize access and knowledge about AI tools, but it could also be a vector for inequality. We know the big tech companies are signing licensing deals with big media companies. Here in the Philippines, they'll probably sign deals with the big TV networks. They might sign with Rappler, but again, if you're a small newsroom in the countryside, chances are you won't get a licensing deal. That's one aspect of inequality. Chances are, if you do work in a regional language, you won't even have tools for transcription that you would have for English or Tagalog or Hindi. But if you're doing a regional language, you won't have access to transcription tools. So all of that adds on to each other. But then on the other side, there's also an opportunity there. There might be opportunity for media organizations banding together to share learnings. For example, regional languages, maybe media organizations could lead with the data sets for training, collaborating with academia. So there's lots of opportunities, but there needs to be a development of expertise within those media organizations, and hopefully they could collaborate together to share learnings, hopefully between newsrooms from south to south, so that we don't go through, a lot of of conferences take learnings from developed newsrooms, and they don't apply to Global South newsrooms. So
Thank you. We'll be very quick, and there is a mic in the center. So those of you who would like to ask a question, please line up there so that we can quickly move on with the questions. Just 2 minutes for you as well, Khalil. We did speak about the audience and the fact that we are going to be audience-driven a lot. So how can we adapt more to audience-informed approaches is one question. But on the other hand, is journalism is all about that? I mean, are we driven by the audience, or is there something else? Yeah. So.
Yeah. So the second question is something I get quite often. So my kind of area of expertise is audiences and user needs, the user needs model. Has anyone heard of the user needs model? No. Okay, so just very quickly, it's a model that the BBC came up with around like 10 years ago, and BBC World Service, I should say. So they basically did like a massive survey of the global audience and realized that people had different needs when they consume news. So at the time, they categorized 6 needs. So, you've got your educate me need, update me need, which are kind of the more, give me the information. And then you've got other needs as well, like give me perspective, which is kind of more analytical, explaining the news, give context to the news. But then you've also got other stuff, inspire me, where people want to feel something, and you've got, divert me, etc., etc. What I'm trying to get to is, so when we apply the user needs model within some newsrooms of the conversation, it's never about telling the editors what it is that they should cover. This is the editor's job. This is editorial. This is newsroom. The user needs model comes in to kind of complement what the editors want to cover. So we're not telling them what it is that you should cover. We're just telling them, if you might cover this particular topic that you've already identified, this particular news item that you've already identified, with that specific lens, right? Is this an update me type story where you're telling people what happened the last 30 minutes? Is this a give me perspective type story where you're giving context to the news that's happening, right? So that's kind of the different lens. So we're never really telling editorial, this is what you should cover. We're just telling them, this is probably what the audience will really get value from. And on just very quickly on your first point about, what was the question again, the first one, which was audiences. Yeah, so I think with audiences have different needs. Ultimately, audiences have different needs. We just need to serve those needs. Journalism, in my opinion, is the service industry. We need to be closer to audiences. We need to serve those needs. If we can do that better with generative AI tools, that I think we should explore. I'm not like 100% big fan of generative AI, although it might sound like it, but it's definitely a tool that I think we're all going to use going forward.
Thank you. So we will reduce the time from like 2 minutes to 1.5 maybe. So there is also the use of AI also fuels disinformation and propaganda, and that becomes another problem in the newsrooms and elsewhere. And what happens is there is always government overreach. When this happens, they try to bring in new restrictive laws. This happened in my own country just a few months ago in Sri Lanka. So how do we manage both? Like we do have this phase of going into artificial intelligence and newsrooms becoming automated, but at the same time there is also that often the reaction to it, and it's all often very repressive.
Is that for me?
Yes, for you.
I'll be very short. Newsrooms need to speak in one voice, get data to bolster your arguments for why, set an example, and engage. Engage with each other, with tech platforms, and with governments. There will be, each party in this has its own agenda, and in some of the markets that we operate in, government may not always be the ally of free press. However, there needs to be engagement because it's not monolithic. It's not black and white. They're always the enemy. There will be areas where there will be areas in common, perhaps in the areas of commerce relating to business models and whatnot. Use of technology, there needs to be engagement, and the news industry needs to do its homework and start talking to each other and speaking in one voice.
Thank you. The last question to you, Kevin. So we talked about government overreach and doing our own homework, but part of that would be also the innovations, right? You create your own tools to fact check, and you had this community app. So how can innovation also help us to move forward? 1 minute, yeah.
Yeah, really quickly. So, yeah, I think I've been very fortunate, I think, to have the opportunity to hear from other newsrooms around the world about how they use AI. And I think what's most fascinating for me is seeing that newsrooms seem to be leading the charge in creating AI products for social good and prioritizing trust and safety. So we've been developing tools for fact checking, for example, language models that better represent local languages. I think Jaemark created a tool for investigating corruption, and I think that's a very beautiful contribution into the AI race. Because tech companies are always after profit, but journalists are really stepping up, not just to hold big tech accountable, but also helping define responsible AI and creating these technologies. So I think we are in a very good position to do that, because newsrooms we've learned to understand tech, or at least we've had to learn to understand tech because in order to survive, and we're still very sensitive to ethics and social impact when creating those tools. So we have created a community app, like you said. We're hoping to create like a safe space for our readers where they could interact with us, our journalists, and even with our editors. That's really our approach to really trying to create a healthier ecosystem, like Irene said earlier, is to really build communities. If you hear anyone from Rappler talk about their efforts, we always emphasize the importance of building communities. So that's really what we tried to create. It's a chat app built on top of a news app, and hopefully we'll be able to federate it with other news organizations also, so they could help us and we could build communities together. So yeah.
Thank you. So we can start the Q&A right away, but questions, no explanations, just one question per person. So please.
Hi, my name is Jan. I run a data consultancy called DB. My question is for Kevin. So when Rappler started its transformation into a data-driven culture, this was, you say, back in 2018, when it was very expensive to transform, right? You have to get your expensive data scientists, your data analysts, your trainers, your data journalists. If you were going to start that process again today with all the technology that we have now, especially with Gen AI, how would you do it? Would it be much cheaper, or would you still invest the same kind of at the infrastructure level to have more control over the technology? And if you don't do that, are we gonna be in another round of platform dependency like we were with the social networks again?
Thank you.
Yeah, it definitely would have been easier, I think, back then if we had the technology that we have now, because a lot of these AI tools do precisely that. They democratize. It allows non-tech experts, for example, to process large data sets, for example. Those things back in 2018, processing large data sets for journalists to investigate they would have had to collaborate with data scientists, data experts, etc. So yes, definitely, if it was back then, we had those technology, we wouldn't have had to at least create a team that was as big as it was then. But if we were to start all over again today, I'd still really recommend bringing in some expertise from the data science community, just because, like Irene said earlier, that's why it's also kind of expensive to do this kind of digital transformation, because it's not just about bringing the tools in. A lot of the work is also in being able to implement them. There's still there's still a lot of things that even if, for example, smaller newsrooms in Mindanao try to use, for example, some of these generative AI tool like text to video, for example, there's still a lot of tech requirements and technical requirements to be able to implement those. Just really being able to integrate it with your feed, etc. Those things would require technical expertise, and I think that's why I think you still will need to somehow work or find ways to work with data specialists, at least for the things that we wanted to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone, and thank you, first of all, for your contributions. I'd like to, I'll just say, I'm speaking as somebody who's been using the internet since before the web was born, and I've lived in the developing world for the last 20 years or so, so I've got a little bit of a taste of the good, the bad, and the ugly of the internet. I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't have a skeptic, an AI skeptic, not a cynic, but a skeptic, on the panel. It would have been nice to hear some really hard, challenging questions, because I think we all accept, and we've said, AI can be stupid, AI can be wrong, AI can be deceptive, and I wish we could have, sort of explored that more. What I'd like to ask you about, though, today is every newsroom needs bright lines, bright ethical lines, that to operate within. We need that because we need to differentiate ourselves from the liars, from the propagandists, from the spokespeople, from the PR. And typically that's a human task. When we use generative AI, which is a term I honestly don't like a lot, I think AI is a really deceptive catch-all thing that disguises the actual use of a lot of tools. When we generate customer-facing content that looks, or that can be made to look exactly like the lies, the propaganda, the whatever, we run a very, very significant risk of being unable to prove, unable to demonstrate that we are actually telling the truth, that we're saying things that are important, and that we're saying things that need to, that serve the public interest and that need to be understood as such. So I'd like to challenge you all and ask you all, what bright lines would you draw in terms of the use of AI in the newsroom?
Thank you. So do you want to take that question, Irene?
I think the brightest line you can draw is you couldn't depend on it to be the source of your information. If the source of your information is the reporting, your own reporting, then that's it. That's all you need. We can try to be sanctimonious about it, but we're in a battle every day. The only currency right now is the attention of our audiences. It's an everyday fight. Like, we're not competing against each other anymore. We're competing with every app on the phone. As the CEO of Netflix once said, our competition is sleep. And so, given that, our only currency is attention, and we're having to fight for that. And as long as we know where our information came from, then I think it behooves every newsroom to figure out for themselves how they are able to package and present that information, that vetted and truthful information, to be able to find the audience it deserves.
Thank you.
I'll be your AI skeptic for this one.
Well, there are a lot of them, I think. Yeah, please go ahead.
My Hong Kong newsroom bans generative AI internally. We bar AI training bots from scraping us, because I worry about AI hallucinations, plagiarism, its lack of attribution. There's no remuneration, I can never say this, remuneration for gobbling up our archive, and that it can't recognize bad faith content, propaganda, etc. Mostly I worry about accuracy, not the big, obvious, stupid stuff, but the small nuanced errors that will get echoed through multiple generations of AI unnoticed. So my devil's advocate question here is it not advisable for newsrooms to hold out on using AI or letting go of their archives, given a risk that people may learn to mistrust AI and return to and value newsrooms that remained human-powered? Maybe for Irene.
Thank you.
We will argue about this later, Tom, at greater length. But I want to ask, are you still allowing indexing for Google?
Yes.
That you are allowing Google to use your content for their generative AI.
It links to us. It backlinks.
No, so AI overviews, formerly known as search generative experience, is the piece of that generative stuff that's at the top in search now. You cannot block it unless you block indexing. So everyone who's in Newsroom should know this, just to be clear. And this is so I think that this question of, are we a skeptic, are we not, what bright lines are we drawing in the sand? I would say that I am skeptical, because I was an investigative reporter before I joined Google back in the day and before I joined the International Fund for Public Interest Media. I'm skeptical of everything. I'm mostly skeptical of people. People lie all the time. People share information. I probably share incorrect information 20, 50 times a day. We all do, because we're humans. The AI is not yes, it can be worse, but we should not pretend like humans are the ones that actually are infallible. We are all infallible. And in terms of this question of the bright line, generative AI, like all technology, is a tool. If we are good at our jobs as journalists, we should be fact-checking and triple-checking. What was the old adage that we all learned in journalism school? If your mother says that she loves you, confirm and check, right? That's what we need to do. And so, and I would also like to make a point on the other side of this, which is that the use of, that's created, or that's a deep fake, is now a way for those who make a mistake, who say something, who get caught in a hot mic moment. Those people, they actually said whatever they said, but they use it as a way to obfuscate and confuse and make people wonder whether or not something is true. We are living in a world now where, most people, especially those who have gone through media literacy training, just don't believe anything. So I think that we need to really have a hard conversation about what we are actually trying to define when we are talking about facts, when we are talking about what our responsibility is, and also what we are asking of others in terms of helping to clean up this world. And it really has to start from our own industry and our own standards.
Thanks. Yeah. Quickly.
Morning, everybody. I'm Naveen Garawal. I'm the editor for News Arena in India. So I'm going to ask, my question here is based on what we experience every day in the newsrooms. Since we're talking of AI in the newsrooms, I think the first thing we all need to know is that the humans created the computers, and it's not the other way around. And still, the human brain is still the best computer ever, and probably will be. So some people have asked questions about ethics. That's the most important thing we face in the newsroom, related to ethics. How ethical is it to, generate a copy and claim bylines? We don't know anything, whether we have not discussed about copyright issues, something generated by the computers, and who has the copyright? So a discussion in a lot of the parties these days is who owns your voice after you're dead? Because there are a lot of copyright issues there too. Then we should, I think, also address the issue of plagiarism, because a lot of content gets copied, modified, and used as original. And of course, AI, as we know in the newsroom, is a disaster when it comes to fact-checking. So if we can,
Sorry, how do we know that? Do we know that?
Oh, we tried it, and maybe we're not trained enough to get it right. So if somebody could just, anyone can just throw a little light on these issues that we are facing in the newsroom.
Anyone? Okay.
Well, for us at Rappler, we are very picky because we are very sensitive about there's a lot of legal, ethical issues surrounding the use of generative AI especially. So we've also been particularly picky about where we use it and how we use it. For example, if you've seen the examples we've shown earlier, a lot of the AI executions that we do focus on AI that uses our own content in Rappler. So for example, there are ways for you to be able to use the capabilities of existing language models and ground it on data sets that you collect, process, and vet yourselves as journalists. So that's what we did for the knowledge graph, for example. It's not trained on some random data sets from the internet. It's trained on data that we collect ourselves. So that way, we're able to really keep it within, make sure that the data that we're using is only, we're only using data that we actually have been able to ethically source, and that our own artists, for example, we only use our own images to train our own AI models. So there's that workaround for us to be able to still use the capacities, but also make sure we're operating within ethical bounds. Yeah.
Yeah, and I should add, sorry, I couldn't resist adding. You shouldn't use AI to generate information out of the blue. That's the worst thing you could do. As a newsroom, as anything, like I mentioned earlier, it's good for questions where you don't need precise answers. But if you need precision, you have to do the reporting yourself. And you mentioned fact-checking. You can't use it to fact-check your work, the vanilla ChatGPT. There are tools you could use. Like there's a fact-checking app that you could see on the ChatGPT store that you could use, and it gets sources from the web, and it gets trusted sources for the web. But again, it has a grounding data. It has ground truth data. So I think we talked about expertise. You may be using AI wrong. That's not the way to use it. You can't outsource your critical thinking. You can't outsource your reporting to the AI, because that just wouldn't work. And we've seen a handful of examples over the past couple of years of everyone, making mistakes, that kind of mistakes. So, please stop using AI for that particular purpose.
So I can't help adding then AI is not for journalists. In general, you need a specialist to use AI.
No, like for example, you could use it for data analysis. You could use it for document research. You could use it to turn a long-form article into a short-form video. But you're the one providing the information. It's about figuring out the use case for AI.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lakshmi Devi from Press Trust of India. And my question is, AI is being used in every sector, and we are talking about AI in newsroom, and it's an unregulated sector. EU is still in the process of framing regulation, and India is also looking at, doing market survey, which sector is using AI. In such a situation, when you said that, we should not use for gathering information, we should use do's and don'ts are many. In such a scenario, do you propose that there should be regulation, whether it is self-regulation or government regulation in place before we promote use of AI in newsrooms?
I think every newsroom should have their own guidelines of where they could and they couldn't use AI. And maybe Kevin could speak more, because they were the first in the Philippines, and Irene too.
Yeah, definitely. There should be internal guidelines for newsrooms on AI use case. In terms of whether or not there are existing regulations, I think Maria always keeps telling everybody also AI in the industry itself is very much unregulated at this point. Rappler has always been in the position that there should be some form of regulation for big tech companies, at least to make sure that trust and safety is always considered in the design of these platforms, I think. But yeah, as to how specifically they should be regulated, I'm not, unfortunately, I don't think I'd have the answer to that, but yeah.
Now, my second question is, do you think that, the indexing with Google, the news industry should stop it to have probably, to check the facts and to encourage proper information?
Thank you, Lakshmi. We can only allow one question. Yeah, but just quickly.
I mean,
yeah.
In short, I think it's up to every organization, it's up to every content creator to decide whether or not they want to block the use of their content for LLMs and generative AI. I think that the question about search is a very, very big one that deserves much more than 30 seconds. So like we can talk about that offline, but I think that this is a big question because what is good for the world, which is high quality information that is free and available to everyone, easily accessible, is at odds with a business model that is crumbling and continues to crumble, especially in a lot of the markets that we're talking about. Reader revenue is not a reality for many markets, and it's already creating a divide in terms of the quality of information. So I think that there's a big question between what is good for the world and society, what is good for the companies that profit off of this information, and then what is good for the organizations that are trying to do this work and getting information out. And until we can find a way to reconcile those very, very huge gulfs, then we're gonna head into even more trouble.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're just running short of time. So
Very quickly.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
Kumar Khuldun Shahid. I'm the Pakistan correspondent for the Diplomat magazine. One of my favorite comments from the session was AI tools are tools and tools can be disruptive. I can give you an example from my part of the world. Jihadist groups like the Pakistani Taliban and Islamic State, they're using AI for their magazines. The Khorasan Voice, Islamic State's magazine, uses generative AI to publish their work. My question is, keeping in line with the theme, how do we make AI more cost-effective, while at the same time making sure that they don't, these newsrooms of these groups don't get access to it?
Khalil, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question. The tool for everyone, so I can't think of any way to stop people from using them. I think what is going to happen in the future is we'll get, and maybe it's already happening, it's already started happening, we'll get a glut of content just generated using AI with no boundaries, etc. So as news organizations, it'll be on us to make sure that we are able to have more trust in people, etc. But I think that discussion, and a lot of the discussion here, is underpinned on the assumption that what we are doing now without AI is a gold standard, when, as an industry, we are not very good. I'm sure loads of you guys in the room are journalists and are doing great work, but as an industry, we're not very good. We are probably the industry that spurs out the most amount of misinformation in the world. We have a lot of negative effect in society, and I don't think we talk about that too much, and we probably should. So when we're talking about drawing lines, etc., I think we should look at what we're doing now with our AI and realize that are we drawing those lines now at the moment? Are we doing what's actually good for people? Are we having a positive impact on society? And I think the reality is we're not. And AI will, I think, just amplify this. If we do really good jobs in newsrooms, AI will amplify this. If we don't, AI will amplify the other stuff, right? Obviously, with AI, there's a lot of questions, there's loads of other stuff that we need to discuss, but ultimately, I think we need to do a better job and move on from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question, Ansgar again here. My question goes to Kevin, but I think it concerns each of us in regard to editorial overview. Kevin, you said that all articles in Rappler are overviewed and reviewed by humans, but then you gave this example of 50,000 candidate profiles, and I don't buy that anybody was able to overview and to read those 50,000 short articles before they were published. And therefore, to make us honest, I think as the output of AI is increasing, we won't be able to control every outcome, every short article of them. And that would be my question. How did you deal with those 50,000 profiles?
Yeah, so it might take a little longer to explain the whole process, but the general idea of it is, again, that's where the knowledge graph comes in, because all the data in the knowledge graph were vetted, processed, and collected by journalists. So we've had to make sure everything there is factual already before they came into the database. And then when we started, so the problem we encountered when we were developing when we were trying to generate all 50,000 articles is that, for example, for one entity, sometimes we had data for all the candidates, but we didn't have the same amount of data for each one. So, for example, there'd be one candidate where you'd have 5 data points and another where you'd have 10 data points. And where the model tends to hallucinate is when it's when you tell it to follow just one template across all candidates. And so when it doesn't have enough data for one candidate to follow that template, that's where it starts to make things up. And so what we did there, and where we really tried to make sure it's not gonna hallucinate, is we created this very exhaustive list of all templates that the model could follow. So for example, if you have only these sets of data for this candidate, only follow this template here. And by doing that, we're making sure when we're limiting what the AI was allowed to say, and then we're able to do, and then all you have to do now is to really do a lot of spot checks to make sure that the model is following the rules that you set. And then we do a lot of this. Of course, we try to review as much as we could before publishing as well. But it's really, at the end of the day, just really making sure that the model is following the rules that you set. Because as long as it's getting it from the data set that is the knowledge graph that you've already vetted, it's pretty much very accurate. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We just have time for one last question, and the people will be around, so you can have a chat if you really want to have more questions.
Nishal Sanghvi from India. I have been seeing that AI avatars have been behaving very close to humans. So how much more time before avatars take over as newsreaders?
Hasn't it happened already in India? I think your politicians were using it for campaigns during this last election. And I was talking to a fellow journalist from India about it. And he wrote a story in The Atlantic saying that the misinformation apocalypse didn't happen because the politicians were using it for campaigning instead of, misinformation. So that was interesting to me. We still don't know how it's going to shake out for the rest of the world. The rest of the world is behind India in terms of how well we do deepfakes. But yeah, regulation needs to catch up. Newsrooms need to catch up. And the good thing is we've had a lot of practice against misinformation the past few years. In the Philippines, we have 2 different fact-checking networks doing the good work. So hopefully that would be enough to try to beat the bad guys.
So this is not about fact-checking. I'm talking about AI taking over as newsreaders, replacing them.
Newsreaders.
Newsreaders, yeah. So a Philippine network actually tried it on social media. It was met with a lot of criticism from the audience. I think the audience spoke for themselves, just because there's a lot of very, very good Filipino newsreaders. And usually with things like this, the first question you tend to ask when using AI for any purpose is, what's a problem you're trying to solve? And in the case of newsreaders, are you trying to solve the problem of paying, your newsreaders too much? It didn't fly in the Philippines, but I know in other countries like South Korea, it's been accepted.
Irene, you just want to quickly add something before we close?
Just a quick question on that. How many of you have a voice-activated device in your house or use one? Google, Siri, Alexa, whatever. How many of you have kids that interact with them? Mm-hmm. Kids they're not going to care about which newsreader or TV anchor. They're used to having a little speaker tell them things and tell them information. We are right now in this room an average of, I don't know how old we are as an average, Like, if we really wanted to know where the future is and what the expectation will be and what is acceptable, we need to look at our 5 and 6-year-olds because it's going to be completely different.
Thank you. So we're going to close this session right now. And thank you so much to all these 4 speakers. And you can deep dive into, when you have the second panel. Thank you. Thanks.